lovers. I'm Deb Krier, the co-host of Cancer and Comedy, where our mission is to heal cancer-impacted people through hope and humor, something we like to call turning the grim into a grin. Well, today on Cancer and Comedy, we're going to be talking about how to make stress your friend. That sounds a little odd, but bear with us. It's going to be a great discussion. So now here is the host of Cancer and Comedy, Dr. Brad Miller.
Hey, Deb, thank you so much. And yes, indeed, we're going to be talking about stress today. And hopefully, we can talk about stress even a little bit of a positive manner about how we can make that work for us instead of kind of against us. Because we're here on the Cancer and Comedy podcast, we are looking to kind of flip the script, as it were. Because when you get the diagnosis of cancer or some other bad, tragic news in your life, it tends to the tendency is to spiral in a downward direction. And we want to change that around. We are all about helping to develop a community of people, helping people to face cancer impacted people to cope with hope. And we like to call that turning the grim of a cancer diagnosis or some other bad thing into the grin of a fulfilled life. And we hope people will get connected to our cancer and comedy community by simply going to our website, cancerandcomedy.com/follow. So, hey, Deb, one of the things we like to do here is tell dumb dad jokes, and I usually have a few ready to go. You ready for a couple really, really, really bad ones today?
I'm ready for some groaners
Some
today.
groaners. You ready? Okay, here we go. Why do octopi always win in a fight?
I don't know.
Because they are well armed.
Cute.
One more. Why did the banana put on sunscreen?
I don't know.
Because it didn't want to peel.
That one's a groaner. That
Yep.
one's definitely a groaner.
You know, had to go with fruit for a little bit here today. So
Yep, I love it. I love it. Well, folks, we're going to have another one of Dr. Brad's bad jokes of the day after our conversation. And then, of course, we get serious with the Faith It or Break It segment. As mentioned, we would love for you to be part of the Cancer and Comedy community, where together we crush cancer with a message of how to cope with hope and humor. Please follow Cancer and Comedy at cancerandcomedy.com/follow.
Well, Deb, today I wanted to tell you there's a brief story that kind of sets up our topic, which is how to face stress and try to make stress work for you, because stress can be something that can come almost out of the blue when you get a cancer diagnosis. It can really kind of shock you, rock you back in your heels, or something else happens. But I remember one time about this time of year that a person came to the church I was serving, and kind of unexpectedly, it was like a Saturday afternoon. I happened to be at the church at my office, and she came in and she was obviously stressed and upset, and had a conversation with her. And it turns out that she talked about the scenario, which I knew had happened. We'd had a automobile accident at our church building a week or so prior, where a person had ran off the road and ran into a telephone pole and the signage that says the name of the church, and it
Yikes.
hit all that, and ended up the car actually knocked the power off at the church for a day or two, and we had to deal with that. And the car ended up on its top in the parking lot of the church, and it was
Oh,
a really
my.
kind of a bad scene, kind of a bad accident. But it turns out the young woman who was inside of the car basically walked away. Yeah, she was scratched up a little bit, but unhurt. Certainly could have been
Oh, good.
devastating. But the woman who came to my church to talk to me that day, quite upset and stressed, was the mother of that young woman.
Mm.
And she just wanted to talk to me about it a little bit, in the sense of it. She told me the story. She had to tell me the story. Basically, the young woman, 18 or 19, broke up with a boyfriend and was just gunning it through the neighborhood where our church was at, and just basically just lost control. She was going about
Aw.
75 in a 30 zone, something like this.
Yikes.
But basically, this mother was so thankful and grateful, and she about her daughter being basically okay, and how the miraculous thing was that she didn't actually hit the actual building of the church. She probably would have been killed if that had happened. And but I remember she kind of broke down in tears and hugged me, even though we're
Oh.
basically strangers. If we
Mhm.
were are strangers, we're strangers. And there was a sense of relief that she
Mhm.
had. My point is to say is that she had great stress in her life, and I
Mhm.
took it to mean that she had not only stress from the relief of her daughter, but there obviously some family dynamic stuff going on there, and she was
Mhm.
stressed about her daughter's mental health and other things going
Mhm.
on.
Mhm.
But the sense of relief that she had, that in the stress that she gave me a hug, and it was a nice moment. And what I
Mhm.
wanted to share, reason why I wanted to share this, because stress can cause us to do all kinds of things, and we need to I believe, try to get it to work for us in some positive
Mhm.
manners rather than spiraling down. So I
Mhm.
think of about this woman, this mom of this young girl, how she could have let that stress just really metastasize and really go to a
Mhm.
bad
Mhm.
place. But she chose to at least take some action to come to the church to
Mhm.
talk to me, the site of where her daughter almost lost
Right.
her life. And so let's talk for a minute, you and I, about how when bad things happen, some stressful situation, how we have the choice really to go bad and go down with it, or whether to make
Mhm.
it work for us. Have you ever had a
Mhm.
situation in your life, either related to your cancer or something else, where some bad thing happened that you either were part of or you witnessed, that you were able to somehow or another take a twist on it that made it a little more of a positive thing, or something that had some energy to it?
Well, I'll be honest, in general, the whole thing, in dealing with cancer is obviously very stressful. And, and there are times where I'm not a happy camper, but I have chosen to use it in a way to help others. And one of which is obviously this podcast with you. I think it's a great way that we have turned something that is devastating in our lives into a way that we can help others kind of deal with it too.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. Sometimes we need to have a little sense of perspective on
Hmm.
stress in our life, that
Right.
we need a certain level of stress.
Hmm.
Like a rubber band doesn't work when it's just just in the
Right.
package.
It needs
A
that
rubber
little
band
tension.
your rubber
Hmm.
band, in order to hold something together, has to have the tension to
Hmm.
work that way. And I think in a lot of our
Hmm.
lives we need a little bit of positive stress to keep us going on. We need to be
Hmm.
encouraged to keep going,
Hmm.
and to be every once in a while kicked in the rear
Hmm.
to to
Hmm.
keep going.
Right.
And yet, we sometimes the perception of the stress is worse than the stress. I One of
Mhm.
the studies I read in preparation for this, I've looked at in preparation for our conversation today, is that a lot of Americans, a lot of people around the world, die prematurely, not from stress, from believing that stress was bad for them, and
Right.
somehow it manifested itself in
Mhm.
other health problems. So
Mhm.
the belief in stress, not necessarily stress, can have impact
Mhm.
on your body. For instance,
Mhm.
when your heart pounds in your chest, some people think that's a bad thing, but it may
Mhm.
be that your body is responding in an appropriate way to kind of
Mhm.
get some oxygen to your blood. If you're
Right. Mhm.
that breathing isn't necessarily, heavy breathing is not necessarily anxiety. It may be from
Mhm.
just, you've took a long walk or
Right.
something like
Mhm.
that. So physical stress is not always a bad thing. So
Mhm.
relate to me that a little bit. How can stress be a good thing even when we may have the perception that it's not?
Mhm. Well, like you said, in so many cases, it's really not a negative. It's just something that's happening. Your heart rate increases. You start breathing differently, all of those things. I think in many ways, stress is your body's way of saying, "Hello, there's something going on that you need to pay attention to." And it triggers the fight or flight, all of those various things. It also, helps us to know when we need to maybe, as you talked about in your example, reach out to others and ask for help. Or maybe we're feeling stressful about someone else, and so we need to reach out to them. I think it's just more like kind of the early warning system in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I think that's well said there. Early warning system, that we kind of a flag goes up and we need to do something
Mhm.
about it, rather than let it go to some deeper level, submerged
Right.
to some
Mhm. Mhm.
place where it can be, stress then can
Right.
be a factor in our health. Something, one of the things that I looked at was something that some writers and some researchers have called the happiness stress connection, that
Mhm.
stress and happiness operate as kind of opposites psychologically. And
Mhm.
there's the if we focus on focus then on increasing happiness, maybe more practical than trying to reduce
Mhm.
stress. And what that means
Right.
is that the absence of stress creates a space for happiness to emerge. And I just
Mhm.
thought I'd just share that with you to see what you
Mhm.
thought. Do we the focus in creating happiness rather than trying to reduce stress? Maybe
Mhm.
that kind of still fills up the space here.
Right. Right. I love that idea, and I think it is, we need to not ignore stress. I think that's one of the biggest things, but it is in how we deal with it. That, are we gonna fuss and fret so much that we give ourselves an ulcer, or cause other things? Or are we gonna look at it, deal with it, and then move on? And a lot of times, of course, the easiest way to deal with it is humor. Sometimes inappropriate humor, right? You
Of
might tell
course.
somebody, "Hey," they've only got, 2 weeks to live, and they go, "Oh, well, hey, that means I don't have to buy anybody Christmas presents."
There you
Nah,
go.
that might not be quite appropriate, but yeah, it's and I think humor is actually one of our reactions to dealing with stress. It's just kind of one of those natural things where we're like, okay, well, let's kind of lighten the mood. And like I said, sometimes it's inappropriate, but it is, I think, in a lot of ways, a very natural reaction to dealing with stress.
Well, yeah, I think you and I take that approach. Cancer and comedy means that we're trying to
Hmm.
take a comedic approach to something bad that happens to us. And sometimes you say sometimes it's inappropriate. Maybe so, but also timing has a role to play here in the sense
Right.
of we need to interject humor and lightness and stress
Hmm.
relief when the stress comes, not
Right.
necessarily on our agenda or on our
Hmm.
time frame. I'm thinking
Hmm.
in the church I attend right now, we're doing we're recording this on a week or so before Thanksgiving, so we're just about a month out from Christmas. But what our church is doing this kind of Sunday afternoon is we're going to a cancer patient's house and we're decorating their house for Christmas because
Oh, how lovely. Hmm.
there's people coming. There's just going to people
Hmm.
decorate both the inside and outside. People bring a
Hmm.
Christmas tree
Wow.
and to go inside, and lots of people
Mhm,
bringing
mhm.
lights and whatnot to decorate the outside. Because unfortunately, this person is in a state of health that they may or may not be able to
Mhm,
appreciate it beyond
mhm,
now. So it's a
mhm,
party to celebrate
mhm.
Christmas, celebrate life, and celebrate this
Right.
person
Mhm,
that I think is going to be a delight to
mhm,
not only the person with cancer, but also a
mhm,
delight to the 15 or 20 people who are going to be involved
mhm.
with this process. And I
Right.
think it's
Mhm,
that kind of leads to this social side of stress is what I've heard
mhm,
some people talk about it, that
mm,
when you are approach stress with a social aspect, as you mentioned, reaching
mhm,
out to people. Some people say that stress can trigger the release of oxytocin, or sometimes called
mhm,
sometimes called the cuddle
mhm,
hormone, which is the
mhm,
need to be supported and
mhm.
touched in an appropriate manner
Right.
and connected to. That's why
Like you said, that woman hugged you.
that's right. Or
Mhm,
any number of, almost any dramatic
mhm,
event we've occurred or we've seen on a TV show or a movie, somebody gets saved from the fire and the
mhm.
fireman saves us, some child from the fire. And what does the kid do?
Mhm.
He hugs and the mom hugs the
Right.
fireman,
Mhm.
whatever, but you get
And
the
firemen
idea.
hug each other, and yeah. Mhm,
And it's this is this empathetic and supportive
mhm,
sense of others, and I think it can sometimes bring out the best in us. That this we need
mhm,
to seek out social connection in order to
mhm,
deal with stress.
mhm.
How do you respond to that? What do you think?
Right. Well, it's funny because as you were talking about that, one of my initial thoughts was the saying "misery loves company,"
Yeah, oh
right?
yes, yeah.
But it, we don't really like that, right? When you get around a whole bunch of people who are not happy, that's just not fun. And so, I think it is more. It's exactly what you were saying. When something bad happens, we do want to kind of have that physical release, that physical support. And it doesn't have to be a hug, maybe it's a high five, maybe it's whatever. But it's kind of like that final release, that aha of, okay, we've survived whatever this was.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think as we go through stressful times, whether it's cancer or
Mhm,
something in the, war and
mhm,
politics and everything else that's out there, we need that release that happens from getting
mhm,
connected there. I
mhm.
the analogy I use when the Misery Loves Company analogy reminds me of the I'm not going to say this correctly, but it's the thing where put the crabs in a bucket. Have you heard this analogy where the a bunch of crabs, or you put a bunch of crabs in a bucket? If one tries to climb out of the bucket, the other
Mhm.
crabs will grab it and pull it back down into the bucket with the other crabs, and they all end up
Right.
getting boiled and eaten.
Mhm.
That kind of thing. Whereas you know, the uh, the in order to get out, you got to be really
We gotta work
strong to.
together.
You got to
Mhm,
work to.
mhm,
If they work together, they all could have got out of
mhm. Right.
the bucket there.
Mhm.
And of course, one of the things we like to talk about here is how we just really believe, don't you, Deb, that a cheerful heart is good medicine. That laughter is a
It
good
is.
thing,
Mhm,
and you
mhm.
being very
Right.
intentional about it. And I think there's even
Mhm,
studies, and we've mentioned them several times, but say that uh, people who do have this miserable countenance about them
mhm.
um, live uh, less, or they live a shorter
Right.
life.
Mhm, mhm,
Um, there's a interesting study of one of the books I've been reading by Dr. Brian King, The Laughing Cure. About there, he mentions a
mhm,
interesting study he did about base pictures of old time baseball players
mhm,
from like 75 years ago. There'd be
mhm,
these team
mhm,
photographs, and in the team photographs, you'd have certain players that almost every photograph every year they have a frown on their face, and other ones
mhm,
who had a smile on their face.
mhm,
And somebody who I don't know how people think about this, somebody tracked that, and they found that
mhm.
the players from 50 years ago had a smile on their face, lived 6 or 7 years longer than the ones with a frown
I
on their
love it.
face.
Mhm,
Now,
mhm,
it's interesting that somebody tracked all that kind of thing, but I do think it shows that something that we kind of know kind of naturally that people, even
mhm,
if whether they live longer or not, they
mhm,
certainly have more of
mhm,
uh, goodness, vitality in their life,
mhm,
more
mhm.
pleasure in their life, no matter what
Right.
their circumstances are.
Mhm.
So
Right.
the hum,
And it also goes to, if you are a cranky person, people don't wanna be around you, and so you end up being alone and lonely. And if you're the happy person, or, maybe you're not, at least you're just not the sad, grumpy person, you're going to have more people around you, and because loneliness, I mean, we definitely saw that during COVID. When
sure,
people were so isolated, that caused so many issues. We are social creatures, and we need to be around other people, even if it's just on Zoom recording a podcast.
sure,
But it's if we don't want to be around those cranky people, and I think that is part of the reason why they die, is they in essence die of loneliness.
sure. One of the people we studied here was a researcher by the name of Kelly McGonigal, and she said that chasing meaning is better for your health than trying to avoid discomfort.
Mhm.
So
Right.
I think that comes into play here too.
Mhm.
That avoid we could try to avoid things here and there, but
Mhm.
eventually, if you try to avoid a problem, eventually you're going to run into basically a brick wall. You're going to get really
Right.
clobbered
Mhm.
by the
Mhm.
problem. And I know your approach. You and I both have had serious health issues to do, and your approach, I know, is to face it, get in there.
Mhm.
Denial
Mhm.
denial doesn't help you in the long term, does it?
No, it doesn't. And it is interesting. Like I had a PET scan several weeks ago, and it was simply, a test just to make sure everything was okay. We were not, there was nothing that bad that we were looking at. But when I get the results online, I couldn't open the file.
Hmm.
I just looked at it and looked at it, and then, of course, I finally opened it, and it said everything was unremarkable. One of the
Yeah.
few times I like to be blonde boring, right? Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, even though you knew that it was gonna be okay, there's still that moment of what if?
Yeah.
And I think that's kinda hard for everybody to deal with, but, and then, of course, when I saw that it was unremarkable, I had to make jokes about it, right?
Sure, of course. There you go. Well, I think that's what we do here at Cancer and Comedy. Try to be helpful to people. And let's kind of leave you
Mhm,
with a thought. One of the guys I used to watch quite a bit when he was with us. is a guy named comedian George Burns, and you probably remember
Mhm,
him and
mhm.
George Burns,
Oh,
and he
love George and Gracie. Mhm,
and yeah, and but George Burns himself lived to be over 100 years old, I understand. And one thing
mhm,
he said is he attributed is a quote from me. He lived to be over 100 and he contributed his longevity to avoiding worry, stress, and tension. And
mhm,
he basically said, even if I was, I was going to try to avoid, if I wasn't going to live a long time, I wanted I would still want to avoid worry,
mhm,
stress, and tension. So he
mhm,
made that a daily practice
mhm, mhm.
to laugh. And so, why don't you just leave us with some thoughts that you may have about daily practices or practices that we
Mhm,
can implement to have to face to kind of make
mhm.
stress our friend. You know how we can do
Right,
this. What are some
right.
practices you have that we
Well,
might be able to apply
I
employ?
think definitely acknowledge it, and accept that it's there. When we ignore it, as you said, sometimes it gets bigger. And so we do that. But then there are certainly ways, maybe you write a gratitude journal, maybe you watch a funny comedy before you go to sleep. And of course, for many people, they pray. And that's turning all of that over to a higher power. I think is something that is very, important for many people.
Yeah. And we hope that one of the practices, regular practices, is that people will join us here on a weekly basis here on the Cancer and Comedy
Yeah,
podcast, and certainly check out our archive. We have well over a year's worth of material now, over 60 episodes and other things that we do, live streams and things like that. And people can always go to cancerandcomedy.com/follow and find out more about what we do here. So hope that we'll be join the community.